Welcome to another episode of The Art of Sales, a dynamic series from Zip Teams on sales enablement, where we bring together accomplished sales leaders to share their insights and experiences with our audience. I'm delighted to introduce our guest for this episode, Mr. Ritesh Varma. With a global exposure to consultative sales, Mr. Varma has worked and led various successful sales teams across multiple industries and geographies. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. We'd love to know more about you and your extensive experience and journey with sales.
Thanks, Anya, for having me here. And it's entirely my pleasure to be here. Through approximately 2+ decades of my experience in consultative sales, I've moved up from product management to pre-sales to and handling it across the geographies. So started with India, moved on to APAC, moved on to Middle East, Africa, Europe, and pretty much everything. And it involves strategies to open new territories. It involves strategies to work on new things to sell. And it's really, really exciting. Sales consulting is something very, very interesting. And I have seen all of it happening all together.
Right. I think sales is that one specific vertical that brings everyone together. You're the most exposed on the board as well when it comes to the whole product, because at the end of the day, it's the sales team that takes it forward to the industry, isn't it?
Right. So sales
Absolutely.
has a very interesting role to play at an overall level. They are the ones who are the torch bearers who take it to the market. And for doing so, they must understand the product, the capabilities, the positives, negatives, everything in order to make things happen. So sales does play a very, very vital role in any organization to kind of take it to the next level.
Absolutely. So you've worked with organizations that have been at the forefront of innovation across various industries and geographies. That definitely must have been a very complex problem statement to deal with during the pandemic. Now, currently, major organizations are currently aiming towards getting back to their pre-COVID revenue growth levels. So keeping that in mind, how has the past year been for you in the organization that you've been engaged with? How do you see things shaping up for this specific year?
So I think pre-COVID things were nice. COVID did kind of have an issue with the overall sales in the start, but I think I've been associated with the IT industry, and IT industry saw or made use of it in the positive way related to COVID. So in the overall way, we evolved not just in sales, but also towards implementations, how we do sales and other things. So if you look at it, sales is all about the human touch. With COVID coming in, that human touch was lost. However, thanks to online medium of online meetings, people were more considerate. They started to kind of understand that since travel cannot happen, online was the next best thing to do. So if you look at it, efficiencies went up. And if you look at it, it was also around how organizations leaning towards IT made it happen, and sales did not get impacted at an overall level. So I think the customers as well as the organizations made the best use of IT in order to kind of take care of their business on a day-to-day level.
Right. So virtual selling was something that was already coming up, but I think the COVID times, the pandemic overall has sort of boomed it and superseded it in a way where everyone was able to work their way through it. And with the whole idea of sales enablement coming across as well, virtual sales was ultimately what took organizations ahead during that specific time, and also with the current landscape or the current market scenario.
Yeah, virtual sales was always coming, but it was something that no one believed in. So, as I said, sales was always about the human touch and everything was happening online. So, online did kind of was a makeshift arrangement, I would say. But it's all back to kind of having that meetings on the face, having dinners, lunches together, having online face-to-face discussions, so that human touch is definitely back in action. But if you look at it, people have started to empathize with people if not being able to travel. So they do have an alternate channel to kind of interact and take care of things. And in a way, what has happened is that the leaders who could not travel due to the limitation of the various other engagements that were there, have now started to interact at a much more elaborate level through online meetings. So that shift definitely has happened. But given a chance, it's always about the human touch back again.
Right, absolutely. So the global banking community is looking at some very exciting things happening in trade finance softwares this year. How are you positioning, how are you positioning your sales teams? Any specific strategies that you're working out that you're thinking on putting in place?
So it's not just the bank, it's not just the trade finance. If you look at it, all the major functions related to the general ledger and accounting or probably automation are in for a major revamp. So what people have realized that digital transformation was always happening, right? It was always a buzzword pre-COVID as well. However, what they realized that businesses can change in a jiffy. So the systems that they deploy need to be on a low code platform, need to be agile, need to be built for change. So it's not just change, it's also change for speed, change for revamp and things like that. So it's not just a trade finance platform. I think anything and everything to do with banking today, to start with, is going and undergoing a major shift over there. And I think this will be the trends going forward. Related to it, organizations are looking at employing more agile systems and more agile ways of working in order to take care of all the three aspects of things related to customer experience, operational efficiency, and business innovation. So if you look at the some organizations on the name of customer, on the name of digital transformation, had fancy portals or fancy uh, apps. However, they were not kind of leaning in towards the operation side of things. So people have started to look at organizations which are comprehensively automated and transforming at the rate of doing things much faster. And that's the motto that sales organizations which are catering to banking are targeting together. How to make automation holistic, how to kind of make it more customer friendly, and how to do it on a comprehensive level. So it's interesting times today. Banking has been the torch bearers for many technologies, but it will soon follow into the other industries as well, including insurance, manufacturing, oil and gas, and others as well.
Right. Like you just mentioned, sales organizations need to keep in mind that these specific platforms are customer friendly, and the fact that you said that automation is the way ahead. So, how do sales reps or how do sales teams bring in that mindset that this is something that we're putting forward, that automation is something, because you need to be convinced in the product yourself before you put it forward. So how is that something that you do with your sales teams, bringing that sense of understanding that this is how the product is and automation is the day, automation is the way ahead?
Right. So that's a very interesting question, Sanya. In fact, if you look at it, unless you believe in the product, you cannot take it to the market. So one of the best ways of doing it is to enable the sales team to be automated. Right from the point that they book or probably start with the lead, moving it into the prospect engagement and different cycles as the organizations may have, and finally booking an order and making sure that it kind of delivers as to what they've committed for. If all of this becomes automated and they start using systems, they would be able to kind of convince it much more better to the customers themselves. So we've implemented such automation platforms which are grown internally into our organizations for sales enablement and also for, so if you look at it, while a sale is happening, a lot of content also keeps on flowing here and there. So it's all about automation comprehensively, including content, including communications to customers, and using AI to make things better at any point of time. So if you look at it, sales organization within our company, before going, have to kind of utilize these systems internally and then get a hang of what they are selling to the customers and what would they benefit at an overall level. So consultative sales is all about experiencing it yourself and then telling it to customers how can things be better for them. So we've enabled practices within our organization to take care of all these things.
Right. So I think enablement also comes from the idea that you need to experience how your own product works and then be able to take it forward. I think that's the whole course of enablement, isn't it?
Right.
Right.
So the product implementation within the organization is key critical. We are lucky to have our own in-house products, which we experiment with different functions, not just sales, but HR, operations, and others, in order to kind of give it a fulfilling experience.
Right. So were there any setup changes within your sales teams that came around the pandemic? How did you implement them? How did you go about them?
So we were also already kind of toying around with the idea of having local sales teams into the major markets. So at the moment, we had subsidiaries at a key nodal agencies out of which people used to work with. What happened during COVID is that the human touch kind of gave way, which was kind of a setback to a certain extent. But if you look at it at an overall level, the whole world was impacted. So it was not localized. The learnings that we took back from there is to start positioning people into our major areas of sales directly into the region itself, so that given a next pandemic happening which is localized, you would not miss out on the major areas that you're working on. So the local teams being positioned in the local geographies was most critical. We also kind of moved around in order to kind of take on local skills from the areas that we are operating into, rather than probably sending people from India and then taking it to the next level over there. So we created job opportunities there itself and made use of the local talent for enabling sales locally.
Right. That's a very interesting point that you mentioned about how you localized, like as in you picked up talent that was more local in nature within the geographies you were, operating out of, and how that could help with actually streamlining a sales process and actually it not getting disrupted in the case of another pandemic or let's say any other process disruption. That's a very interesting way of going about business continuity as well as sales enablement. So, moving on, how do you determine the success of a sales representative and their contribution to the targets in place? Do you have any specific initiatives that recognize these, these targets of theirs or whatever accomplishments that they've made?
So if you look at it, sales is generally measured by numbers for sure, right? So what we do, however, if you look at it at a global level, you can't have all the five fingers behaving in the same way, right? They are all of different nature. They all have a specific different purpose. So if you look at it, depending on the geography that we are into, whether it's a growth geography or probably a new geography for us, or probably an old geography for us, we go about determining targets based on those. However, these targets are further divided into the kind of business that they've already done or the potential that they carry. So we do a lot of market research concerning to this in order to arrive at those numbers. However, it's not just the numbers that we measure. It's also around how many logos do they acquire, or probably how much of pipeline do they build in order to kind of make it successful at a later point of time. How much of marketing have these guys done in the region so that you're able to take on competition at a later point of time? Which industry verticals have you opened in order to kind of make a dent at a later point of time? So while immediate numbers are very, very critical for the old geographies or the geographies in which we have traditionally been operating into, which includes India, Middle East, Africa, APAC, the new geographies like Europe and ANZ and things like that, we measure on different yardsticks so that no one loses out. It's all about motivation and it's all about kind of keeping the teams up to speed so that you're able to make that difference.
Right. In this regard, any specific pointers that keeps your sales teams in place? Like we just mentioned that it's not something that can be generalized because we're working out of various geographies and you can't measure all of the success or all of the targets to just one thing. So any specific pointers that are stable or constant across the entire sales team across geographies that keeps the sales team going, that okay, this is something that we want to do?
Okay, so if you look at it in an IT industry, especially from a product IT industry as such, uh, you actually get a kick of selling something new and selling something which has a lot of product component into it, the license component into it. So the motivation behind any sales to happen at an overall level is how much of new license sales that you can do. And the challenging part is if you could do it into a new vertical, new geography, or a new setup altogether, that is the real kick that you get out of a sales to happen. So we keep on motivating our team members in order to kind of make this happen. And probably we give weightages to anything new that is happening in the geography as compared to something run of the mill that has been sold. So incentivizations are different for something new that has been sold as compared to the others. However, at the end of the day, it's all about numbers and meeting your targets.
Absolutely correct. So moving on, what other technologies are you exploring and enabling your teams with, considering virtual selling and hybrid selling is the way that we're moving forward with, is how the community is looking at it?
So there are a lot of trainings that we have started to do. And the first point was to do it virtually. So instead of getting people into a room and started building on it, the trainings that we have started to enable is all virtual, which is around using platforms to kind of go about building training materials and things like that. So while that is the case, it's also about the softer skills that are kind of being enabled as to what to kind of how to address the other side of the table, how to kind of uh, you should not be sitting in a noisy place, for example. You should take time and be punctual about the meetings. So the softer skills are equally critical in order to kind of make things happen.
Right, right. So also when we talk about sales enablement lately with virtual sales, conversational AI is something that has come up lately. How are you experimenting across with this?
Well, conversational AI, chat GPT is the buzzword today. We have started to kind of um, a lot of our customer service is something that we are trying to kind of build solutions around ChatGPT and the conversational API and see how they can be leveraged into the overall automation from an intake perspective. So if someone calls up the call centers, or probably if someone sends an email, how do you kind of pick it up, build analytics around it, understand the context, understand the sentiment, and then probably work on it. So either respond to it or probably take it to the customer service executive in order to service it. So that can be one of the use cases. However, opportunities are immense. Anything and everything that you can actually do from a conversation and imply and take it forward to the next level can be kind of taken up from a conversational AI perspective, but you also need to kind of also work on how and what to do with that understanding or the context that you've set up. So that's the automation bit. So stitching it all together, as I said, into an entire journey is what we do best and what we are trying to kind of work on in the times to come. So you see a lot of things happening on that front globally, not just with us.
Right. So, how are you placing sales enablement along with other critical focus areas when it comes to your 2023 targets?
Sales enablement, now that the world has actually stabilized to a certain extent, sales enablement is a key area for us. And that's where we are actually focusing on. And as I said, we have taken on people from multiple nationalities and regions to work on. The enablement starts playing an equally critical role in order to kind of make the entire organization successful, so as to say. So various features are being kind of talked around. What is the roadmap that we are working on? What kind of products that we'll be taking out in the market in times to come? And how would the overall thing work for us? So those are all enablement sessions, both from, as I said, the technology side, the product side, the softer skills, and also how to address the market at an overall level. In certain regions, we are also kind of enabling them with linguistic issues or probably things like that in order to fulfill things at an overall level. And it's not just the sales, we are also kind of doing it for the consulting team, the pre-sales team, the implementation team, and the entire organization at an overall level.
Right. So you just mentioned that now that the word or the term sales enablement has stabilized itself. So basically, I think it's best for us to understand that sales enablement was something that was always around. It has just
Right.
become a talk of the industry or talk of the town only now that we've coined a term for it. So as someone who's been in the industry for the longest time, what are your learnings when it comes to core sales enablement that you would like to share with our audience?
So if you look at it, sales enablement, as you rightly said, Sanya, was always there. And you can't have a team which is selling in the market which is not enabled. So somehow or the other, such enablements were already happening. It's now that you've actually realized that uh, how can you do it in a holistic way in order to gain the most out of it. So it's become more structured and it has become more empathetic, if I may call it so. So why? Because sales was always taken to be something which was always only about relationships and taking it to the next level, opening doors and leaving it for others to come in. However, today, if you look at it, sales is a more holistic function. Unless you are able to understand what you're selling and what benefits it will carry to the market for you, you would not be able to make a dent. And if you're not able to make a dent, you'd obviously not have successful sales team members, which always has an impact on the organization. So enablement is not just about selling it correct. It's also about selling it to the right audience in the right way with the right benefit statement. And that requires a lot of self-learning as well. So it's no longer about a classroom-based training where you get everyone in together. It's a self-paced learning that most of the enablement sessions are working on. And for that to happen, you must have excellent tutors, you must have excellent guides and mentors on the field to take it to the next level. So that's where we are actually working on in order to build it holistically and see that it's carried out to the hilt.
I don't think you could have put it in any better words than that about sales enablement and how you tied it up with how integral and imperative sales coaching is to be able to streamline sales enablement across the organization. That you put it in a very, very amazing way. So I think we've talked shop enough. So just like to know why you chose sales as a career and how do you think it's shaped you, considering you just mentioned you went into pre-sales, you've been into consultative sales. How has it shaped you over the years? And any specific philosophies that you've driven out of all these years of experience that take on your personal life as well?
So Sanya, I've been doing consultative sales, which basically means that I'm responsible for consulting while selling, which is a very, very interesting field and a logical kind of extension of what I've been doing throughout. Why is that so? Because if you have to sell something, you have to actually be on top of your game in order to make things happen, which means that you should also understand technology, as I said, your product, what value you'd be driving at an overall level, which basically means that your learning never stops. And that's what was the interesting part into following such a thing, that your learning should not stop. And if you're conversing with a person, say in France, about the upcoming nuances or how the banking industry is transforming, you must have understood the nuances that are there in the region, how it's transforming before you get into a conversation with them. Not only that, you must also be talking about how the world is transforming and how France is doing. So it's not just about uh, selling your product, it's also about establishing that ecosystem in order to establish what you would be selling to them and derive a value statement out of that. So consultative sales is very, very interesting, and it kind of exposes you to a whole lot of people whom you can actually brainstorm with in order before the final sales happen. So that's what kind of makes it very, very interesting at an overall level.
Right. So sales as a whole, across our whole conversation, we've realized has changed incrementally, and over the past 3 years, even more so. So how do you keep yourself motivated as a leader, and how do you stay on top of the game? Because over the past 3 years, new set of trends have come in, the market scenarios have rapidly changed.
So if you look at it, Sanya, your learning has to never stop. And it's not just about someone telling you to do that. It's also about your own motivation to do that. So that means a lot of learning, a lot of self-paced learning. So you have fabulous platforms today which you can employ, networking around so that you have a set of good friends who can actually take you through the various trends. And finally, kind of being taking it to the market and brainstorming it with your colleagues as well, so that you're able to make that difference. So it's a holistic process at an overall level to comprehend, contextualize, and put it all together in front of the customers before you sell.
Right, sir. I think we missed you towards the end.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I was just saying that it's all about contextualizing, understanding, and then putting it all together before you sell it to the customer.
Right, right. I think that's an amazing point that you put forward about being contextual in nature. So, like you just mentioned, that learning never stops, and the fact that I think sales reps and sales teams cannot really work in silos. They have to work in tandem with all verticals to be able to not only just sell the product but also make it better. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. No, for sure. In fact, what happens in, say, banking is very, very relevant to extending it to insurance, or probably extending it to the way of doing things. So if you look at it, the fundamentals of customer experience, operational excellence, and business innovation apply anywhere into any industry. So while, as I said, there can be a few industries who are taken a leapfrog to kind of take things forward, but it can always be applied to something new in the other industries as well. And that's what will make the difference in the times to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking out the time to be here with us and sharing all the knowledge that you did with us, Mr. Varma. It's been a very knowledgeable session about how sales as a whole is just something that's constantly changing and will continue to change. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanya, for having me today.